At Thanksgiving dinner, right as I lifted my glass, my dad looked straight at me and said, "Nobody needs you. Not your money. Not you." Kayla laughed into her wine. My mom didn't even blink. The room kept eating like nothing had happened. What they didn't see was my hand trembling under the table or the folder waiting on my laptop at home labeled Family Ledger. They didn't know about the loan in my name I never signed. And they had no idea one of them was already under investigation. But what they didn't know was only beginning. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. People always say blood is thicker than water, but they never talk about what happens when the people you trust most start draining you dry. If any part of this already feels familiar, stay with me because it gets worse. I didn't always understand how my family worked. Growing up, the Morgan house felt loud and warm from the outside, but inside, the warmth never seemed meant for me. My earliest memory is of a dinner when I was maybe 7. The kitchen smelled like burnt rolls and dish soap. The TV in the living room buzzing with a football game no one was watching. Mom stood behind Kayla, piling mashed potatoes onto her plate, the good kind, creamy, buttery, the kind she only made on weekends. When she finally glanced at me, all she said was, "There's more in the pot if you want it." I remember turning to look at the pot. It was practically scraped clean. Kayla's fork clinked on her plate as she dug in, kicking her feet under the table like she'd just won something. I swallowed hard and muttered, "It's fine." And maybe it was fine, once. But it carved deeper than I understood then. A few years later, in middle school, I won a regional science award. My name was printed on a cheap little plaque that smelled like varnish, and the teacher handed me a certificate still warm from the copier. I was buzzing with pride, cheeks hot, palms sweating, but in a good way. I begged Mom to come see me get it. She showed up 20 minutes late, dragging Kayla behind her. Kayla wore a sparkly headband and kept taking selfies, ignoring the ceremony completely. After I walked off stage, Mom didn't even hug me. She just said, "Let's take a picture. Kayla, sweetie, stand here. Your hair looks so cute today." So, there I was, holding my award, while Mom fussed over Kayla's lighting. The photo she posted later didn't even have me in it. Just Kayla, smiling, captioned, "Big day for our family." I didn't know it back then, but that moment would matter later, when I finally understood that in our house, success only counted if it belonged to someone else. When I was 16, I got my first job at a grocery store on the edge of town. The air inside always smelled like overripe oranges and bleach. My fingers were constantly dry from stocking shelves and pulling boxes open. My dad would pick me up after shifts, barely looking up from his phone. He'd drive in silence until we pulled into the driveway, then say, "Don't forget to hand your check to Mom. Things are tight this month." So I did. Every week, I handed over the envelope before I even had a chance to open it. Mom always kissed my forehead and said, "You're keeping this family together." But one night I overheard Kayla bragging to her friends about her new shoes, the neon pink ones everyone wanted. "Lexi paid for them," she giggled. Well, kind of. It hit me differently that time. Harder, but I still told myself families help each other. I just didn't realize I was the only one doing the helping. Christmas that year was the first time I felt the imbalance in my bones. Snow was falling in lazy flakes outside the window, the living room glowing gold from the string lights Mom taped around the windows. Kayla tore into her gift's designer perfume, a leather bag, a bracelet with her name engraved. When it was my turn, Mom handed me a planner. A plain, gray, office supply store planner. "You love organizing," she said brightly. "And here's a new coat. Practical, right?" The coat was 2 sizes too big, Dad said. "You'll grow into it." I was 16. I laughed it off. Because what else do you do? But that night, lying awake in my drafty bedroom, listening to the heater rattle in the walls, I felt something heavy settle in my chest. I told myself it didn't bother me, but it did. Then there was Grandma Helen, the only person who ever really saw me. Her house always smelled like peppermint tea and old paperback books. Her kitchen light flickered, but in a soft way, like a candle. I'd sit at her table while she stirred her tea, the spoon tapping gently against the ceramic. "You don't have to save everyone, honey," she'd say, resting her warm hand over mine. "Don't let them tie your whole future to that house." I never understood what she meant. Not then, but that sentence would come back to haunt me. When she passed, everything changed in a way I wasn't prepared for. On the day of her funeral, the church basement smelled like lilies and wet coats. After everyone left, I slipped into her old room in the house just for a minute of quiet. There was a small wooden box tucked under her bed, filled with letters, receipts, and notes written in her shaky handwriting. One document was a loan form with my parents' names on it. Another had a sticky note that read, "This will be trouble someday." I closed the box. I wasn't ready to understand any of it. Not yet. I didn't know it back then, but that box was the first crack in the entire foundation of my family. By the time I moved out at 22, I thought I was finally stepping into my own life. My first apartment was barely bigger than a closet, with a leaky faucet that clicked all night and a fridge that hummed like it was dying. But it was mine. I remember sitting on the floor that first evening, eating dollar store mac and cheese straight from the pot, feeling something close to freedom. That feeling lasted exactly 4 days. Mom called while I was sorting through a stack of mismatched mugs I'd collected from thrift stores. Her voice was thin, trembling, the kind she knew would hit me right in the gut. "Lexi, honey, your dad's been dealing with a lot. And Kayla, well, she's just under so much stress. Could you help with this month's utilities? Just this once. Just this once." The most expensive phrase in my life. I transferred the money, even though my bank balance dipped into the kind of number that made my stomach coil. I told myself I was being a good daughter. That's what good daughters did. 2 weeks later, Kayla called me from what sounded like a club bathroom. Thudding bass. Girls laughing in the background. Muffled yelling. She sniffled loudly and said, "Lex, my rent is due. And Tyler was supposed to help, but he's just going through so much. I don't know what to do." She didn't sound devastated. She sounded drunk. I could hear the echo of someone knocking on the door, yelling at her to hurry up. Still, I wired the money. When I hung up, I stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment. A brown water stain shaped like a handprint spread across the plaster. I remember thinking, I'm 22 and already drowning in everyone else's emergencies. But I didn't say those words out loud. Not even to myself. Months passed like that. I built my career brick by brick, late nights at the office bathed in the glow of a computer screen. Early mornings filled with black coffee that tasted like burnt promises. I earned promotion after promotion, becoming the person who held entire projects together. My family noticed, but only in the way people notice weather. Convenient when it works in their favor. When I told Dad about my promotion to senior operations manager, he grunted and said, "That's good. So, any chance you could help with the property tax this year?" It slipped our minds. Slipped their minds? Kayla, overhearing, chimed in, "And maybe you can spot me for my car payment? Just until I'm stable." Kayla hadn't been stable a day in her life, but somehow, that was always my problem. One night, after a long shift, I walked into my apartment to find the hallway lamp still glowing, casting soft light over my kitchen table. My laptop sat open, an unread email blinking at me like a warning. It was from a lender I didn't recognize, reminding me that my monthly payment was overdue. Payment for what? I didn't have a loan. My throat tightened as I read the email again, this time slower. My name, my address, the last 4 digits of my social. A cold tremor moved through me, sharp and electric. I told myself it had to be a mistake, maybe a glitch, but as I dug through my bank statements, I saw small discrepancies. Transfers I didn't remember authorizing. Fees that didn't make sense. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of the avalanche. The next day at work, Jordan caught me staring at my screen, pale and silent. She handed me a cup of coffee, the good kind, the kind she knew I never bought for myself. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. I told her about the loan, the missing money, the late payment email. Jordan didn't hesitate. She reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a card, and placed it in my hand. "Call him," she said. "This isn't family help anymore. This is exploitation." I laughed, because the alternative was crying. But I tucked the card into my notebook. Later that night, I opened Grandma Helen's wooden box again. The one I'd ignored for years. The one that smelled faintly of peppermint and old paper. I sorted the documents slowly, fingers trembling as I unfolded each one. And there it was. A loan form dated 2017. My name, my social security number. But the signature wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. My chest tightened, breath catching like I'd swallowed ice. The room tilted slightly, the lamp flickering overhead. I didn't understand how deep the betrayal went. Not yet. But I could feel, somewhere deep in the marrow of my bones, that everything in my life was about to split wide open. I didn't know it then, but the truth was finally waking up. Trouble never arrives as a thunderclap. In my family, it came quietly like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor caves under you. The weeks after discovering the forged signature felt like walking through fog. Every sound had an echo. Every interaction carried a weight I couldn't name yet. The first real fracture came from something small. It always does. Mom called late one Tuesday evening, her voice soft and trembly in that way she used whenever she wanted something. I was reheating leftover noodles, the smell of garlic filling my tiny kitchen, when she said, "Lexi, honey, your dad got a medical bill in the mail. It's a lot. I don't want to burden you, but he's been so stressed." I leaned against the counter, staring at the peeling paint near the sink. "How much?" "Just 1,200, she whispered, as if the softness would make it reasonable. "I know it's a lot, but with your job, the line she always used. The line that made me feel like my work existed solely to patch their holes. I paid it. Of course I did. And 2 weeks later, when I accidentally saw the insurance breakdown while dropping off groceries at their house, I learned the truth. Their out-of-pocket was $30. 30? I confronted Mom, gently, voice shaking, asking why she lied. She didn't hesitate. "I wasn't lying, Lexi. I just didn't want your father to stress. You know how he gets. You're stronger. You can handle it. Stronger. Handle it." The roles carved into me since childhood. That night, I sat in my car outside their house, hands gripping the steering wheel until my palms throbbed. I kept replaying her words. "You can handle it," until they felt like a threat. I swallowed it, telling myself maybe it was just a misunderstanding, but it carved deeper than I wanted to admit. The next blow came from Kayla. She showed up at my apartment without warning, pounding on the door until the hinges rattled. When I opened it, she stormed inside, her mascara smeared, her hair tangled like she'd been crying for hours. She threw an envelope onto my coffee table. "Look at this," she snapped. I unfolded the paper. Past due notices, credit card balances, late fees. A snowball of irresponsibility towering into numbers that made my head spin. "I need you to help me fix this," she said. "Tyler says you know how to handle money, and you owe me. After all the times I covered for you growing up. Covered for me." The revisionist history landed like a slap. "Kayla," I said quietly, "this isn't my debt. It's your problem." She shot back. "You don't get it, I'm drowning." Behind her, Tyler leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes flat. "It's easy for you. You make 6 figures. Just consolidate it. She'll get back on track." I looked at him, then at her. The whole apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm, air thinning. "This isn't responsible," I said. "You need a budget. You need—" "No," Kayla exploded. "I need you to stop acting like you're above everyone." The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they were true, but because she believed them. In the end, I agreed to help restructure her payments, but I refused to sign anything in my name. It was the first boundary I'd ever drawn. Kayla called me cold. Tyler muttered a sarcastic, "Real nice, Lexi." I tried to brush it off, but their anger lingered, a bruise that didn't fade. A few days later, I received another email about the mysterious loan. This time, it wasn't a gentle reminder. It was a warning, final notice before default. My stomach dropped. I sat at my desk at work, the glow of my monitor blurring as my pulse thundered in my ears. I clicked through every attachment, every detail. The loan amount, the dates, the supposed signatures. Someone had been using my identity. I walked to the office kitchen on shaky legs. Jordan was there, pouring stale coffee. She took one look at me and set the pot down. "Lex, what happened?" I showed her the email, the forged document. Her eyes hardened. "This isn't stress. This isn't a mix-up. This is a crime. I don't want to blow things up," I whispered. She shot me a sharp look. "They already blew it up. You're just standing in the debris pretending the house is still whole." Her words stuck with me long after I walked away. The shift happened slowly after that. At the next family dinner, a casual Sunday meal, Dad smirked when I walked in. "Did you remember Kayla's car payment?" he asked before I even sat down. "I'm not covering that," I said calmly. The whole room froze, like I'd flipped the table. Mom set down her fork. Lexi, don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said. I'm saying no. Kayla scoffed. You're unbelievable. Tyler added. Guess success really does change people. Their voices rose, overlapping, sharp enough to scrape bone. The mashed potatoes were lumpy, the roast too salty, but I barely tasted anything. My chest tightened with every insult tossed my way. I left before dessert, feeling their eyes burning into my back. But the worst wound came days later, when I discovered a set of transactions from my account to Kayla's scheduled transfers I hadn't set. My breath hitched as I scrolled. Duplicate charges, reoccurring payments, all automated. I called the bank. They told me the setup was done from a device associated with your home address. Not my apartment, my parents' house. The place Kayla often stayed. My vision blurred. My skin prickled cold. Someone had accessed my banking information. Someone I loved. And still, I hadn't seen the full shape of the betrayal yet. I didn't know it then. But the biggest rupture was coming, the moment that would shatter whatever illusion of family I still clung to. The unraveling didn't happen in a straight line, it happened in circles, each one tightening around me until I could barely breathe. After the automated transfers discovery, something in me shifted. Not enough to act. Not enough to confront them. But enough that the air at my parents' house tasted different, heavier, metallic, like a storm was hiding in the walls. The next mini-disaster came wrapped in the smell of burnt coffee and cigarette smoke. I had stopped by to drop off some tax forms Dad insisted he needed my help with. The moment I walked inside, I heard voices low, urgent, like a conversation they didn't want overheard. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding, breath shallow. Dad said, "She won't notice. She never does." Mom whispered, "What if she finds out? What if it comes back on us?" He scoffed. "Lexi? She's too busy being the responsible one. That's why we depend on her. She's not going anywhere." The words sliced through me with a cold, clean precision. I stepped on a creaky floorboard, and they stopped talking instantly. When I walked into the kitchen, Mom spun around too fast, plastering on a smile, her voice too bright. "Oh, Lexi, we didn't hear you come in." My hands trembled as I placed the papers on the counter. Dad patted my shoulder with forced warmth. "Thanks, kiddo. Kiddo." As if I wasn't holding their entire financial world together. On the drive home, the sky turned a sickly gray, clouds hanging heavy like they knew something I didn't. I kept replaying their words. "She's not going anywhere." It felt less like a belief and more like a strategy. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than any wound yet. 2 weeks later, Kayla staged a full meltdown. I was at work, elbows deep in a quarterly report, when my phone buzzed 12 times in a row. I stepped into the stairwell, a draft of cold air slipping through the concrete walls as I answered. Kayla's voice cracked with urgency. "Lexi, they froze my card. I'm at the store and they're looking at me like I'm stealing. You have to send something." "Kayla, I can't." "You have to," she snapped. "You're the only one who can." Her voice sharpened. "Do you want me to be homeless? Is that it? You want me to fail?" The guilt flared instantly, old, familiar, instinctive. But this time, something inside resisted. "No," I said softly. "But I can't keep fixing this." Her breath hitched, like she couldn't believe I'd said it. Then she hissed, "You're pathetic. You act like the victim, but you love this. You love feeling superior." She hung up before I could respond. I leaned against the cool cement wall, heart thudding in my ears. I felt sick, not because of her words, because of how easily she weaponized them. That night, Tyler texted me, "You better fix this. Kayla's falling apart because of you." As if her decisions had been mine to manage. I blocked his number. It was the first clean cut I'd made. But boundary setting came with consequences. A few days later, I visited my parents' house to pick up some mail that had mistakenly been delivered there. When I walked in, Kayla was already in the living room, sobbing dramatically while Mom rubbed her back. Dad stood behind them, jaw tight. Mom looked up at me, eyes wet. "Lexi, how could you? She needed you." "She needs help," I corrected. "Real help, not a bailout." Kayla shot me a venomous glare. "Just say it. You think you're better than me." "I never said that." "You don't have to," she spat. "It's written all over your face." Dad stepped in, voice sharp. "Enough. Lexi, you will help your sister. This family sticks together." Something in me snapped not loudly but decisively. Sticking together isn't the same as draining one person dry, I said. Silence fell, thick and choking. Dad's eyes hardened. You take everything so personally. Mom whispered, Sweetheart, don't ruin dinner. Dinner. They were worried about dinner. Their minimization wasn't new. But for the first time, I saw it for what it was, survival at my expense. I left without taking the mail. 2 days later, the real blow arrived. Another notice from the lender. This time, not just overdue defaulted. I sat on the floor of my apartment, the cheap rug scratchy under my legs, the lamp flickering overhead. I read the letter again and again, the words blurring as nausea curled through me. The loan was real. The signature was forged, and the dates aligned suspiciously well with the time I'd been pressured into restructuring Kayla's debts. My phone buzzed. It was from an unknown number. You'll get another email soon. Don't freak out. Tyler. My blood went cold. Another email arrived minutes later. This one from the same lender confirming a change in contact information. Someone had updated the primary email to Kayla's address. I stared at the screen, breath shallow. A single thought echoed through my mind. They weren't just taking money. They were stealing my identity. That night, I sat on my bed, pulling the old wooden box from Grandma Helen onto my lap. My fingers brushed over the faded tape, the familiar smell of peppermint rising faintly as I opened the lid. Inside, under the letters and notes, something caught my eye for the first time, a folded piece of paper tucked into the corner, brittle with age. I unfolded it slowly. It was a handwritten note from Helen, short, shaky, but clear. If you're reading this, Lexi, it means the house has taken more from you than it ever gave. Don't let them tie your life to their mistakes. Protect yourself, protect your future. You deserve a life that isn't built on their debts. My throat closed. Tears burned at the backs of my eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition, from clarity. I didn't know exactly what I would do. But for the first time, I knew I had to do something. This wasn't just family trouble anymore. This was a crime, and I wasn't going to be their casualty. Christmas at the Morgan house always looked perfect from the outside. Warm lights strung across the porch, a wreath Mom made by hand. Tyler's old truck in the driveway. Snow pressed against the windows in thick, soft sheets. The kind of scene strangers drove by and thought, what a beautiful family. But inside, the air felt wrong. Too still, too curated. Like everyone was performing the idea of a family instead of being one. I stepped through the doorway, brushing the cold from my coat. Mom greeted me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Lexi, there you are. We thought you weren't coming. I said I'd be here, I replied. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Inside, my heartbeat was a steady drum. Waiting, timing, counting down. Kayla sat curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up. Tyler leaned back beside her, arms spread across the cushions, smirking like he was waiting to deliver a punchline. Dad stood near the dining table, carving the ham with slow, deliberate movements. The table was set for 5 real candles, cloth napkins, the good plates. One chair sat empty. Grandma Helen's. Mom kept putting it out every year, pretending it was sentimental. But even sentiment had degrees. Some were real, some were props. As I sat down, the smell of cloves and roasting ham filled the room, thick enough to choke on. Silverware clinked. Kayla laughed at something on her phone. Dad cleared his throat. Before we eat, he said, I just want everyone to remember tonight is about family. No drama. No overreacting. The irony nearly made me smile. Mom added, and Lexi, let's try to enjoy tonight. Okay? It's Christmas. She said it like I was the problem, like I was the storm they had to brace against. Dinner began. Small talk, forced laughter, the crackle of the fireplace. I barely touched my food. My mind was too sharp, too aware of every sound, the scrape of Dad's knife on the cutting board, the soft click of Kayla's acrylic nails on her phone screen, the uneven pop of the candle wick burning beside me. Dad finally looked up at me and said, So, you sort out Kayla's situation? I didn't answer. Kayla didn't look up, but her lips curled. She didn't. Mom set down her fork. Lexi, your sister's had a hard year. My jaw tightened, and I've had enough. The room stilled. Dad's eyes sharpened. Enough of what? I met his gaze. Enough of being used. Tyler snorted. Oh, here we go. Kayla rolled her eyes dramatically. You think everything is about you. It usually is when my name is on your debt, I said. Dad slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. We don't need your attitude. You don't need me? I cut in softly. You don't need my money? You don't need me at all? Isn't that what you said at Thanksgiving? Silence. Thick. Heavy. Mom swallowed hard. We were upset. You take things personally. I finished. Yes, because some things are personal. Dad waved a dismissive hand. Let's not drag this out. Your sister made mistakes. You're the responsible one. Help her. That's how family works. A cold, unexpected calm washed over me. No, I said. That's how you work. Kayla leaned forward, eyes flashing. Wow, you're actually unbelievable. You think you're better than us now? I think I'm done, I said. Before anyone could respond, a sharp knock rattled the front door. 3 hard blows, precise, deliberate, official. Everyone froze. Dad frowned. Who the hell? Maybe Amazon. Mom whispered, though her voice shook. The knock came again, louder this time. Dad pushed back his chair, irritation rolling off him as he stomped toward the door. He swung it open. 2 people stood on the porch, 1 man, 1 woman. Heavy jackets dusted with snow. The woman held a folder. The man lifted his badge. Good evening. Financial Crimes Unit, he said. We're here for Kayla Morgan, Tyler Brooks, Mark Morgan, and Caroline Morgan. The room exploded into stillness. Mom stood abruptly, napkin falling from her lap. There must be a mistake. The woman stepped inside calmly. There is no mistake. We need to ask you all some questions regarding ongoing financial fraud and identity misuse. Kayla shot to her feet, face draining of color. What? No, this isn't. Tyler scoffed, stepping forward. You can't just barge in. This is private property. The man replied, we have legal authority to speak to all parties involved. He opened the folder, revealing documents. I recognized my documents. Screenshots, bank statements, forged signatures. Dad turned toward me slowly, suspicion blooming across his face. Lexi, what did you do? I stood up, smoothing my hands down the front of my sweater. My voice was steady. I stopped hiding what you did. Kayla's voice cracked. You called the cops on your own family? I didn't call anyone, I said. I hired a lawyer. The investigators began reading off transactions, dates, amounts, transfers into Kayla's account, withdrawals from mine, the forged loan documents. Tyler tried to interrupt 3 times. Dad snapped that it was a misunderstanding. Mom pleaded that families move money around all the time. The female investigator looked directly at them. Not like this. Kayla shook her head violently. You wanted me to fail. You wanted this. No, I said quietly. I wanted peace. Mom stepped toward me, tears forming. Lexi, please, tell them this isn't what it looks like. I met her eyes. For once, it looks exactly like the truth. Dad's face twisted. If you walk out that door, don't come back. I felt something inside me close, not a wound, but a door. One that had stayed open far too long. I picked up my coat, slipped it on slowly. The room felt unbearably bright, the candles flickering like they knew the ceremony was over. I looked at my father one last time, at the man who'd told me I wasn't needed. I left a long time ago, I said. Tonight, you're just catching up. And I walked out, the air outside shockingly cold, clean, honest. Behind me, the investigators began their questions. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I didn't go home right away. For the first time in years, I drove without rushing, without rehearsing explanations in my head, without preparing myself for whatever disaster waited on the other end. The roads were quiet, snow piled along the curbs, streetlights flickering like they were blinking sleepily at the empty streets. When I finally stepped into my apartment, the silence hit me like warmth. Not the fragile, suffocating silence of my parents' house, but something gentler. My own breathing, the low hum of the heater, the soft click of the door locking behind me. I hung my coat on the rack and stood in the middle of my living room, feeling the weight of everything that had just unfolded. The investigation, the shock on their faces, the fury, the denial, the fear. For years, I thought leaving them would tear me apart. But the truth was simpler. Staying had been the thing killing me slowly. My phone buzzed. Dozens of notifications, missed calls from Mom, long texts from Kayla, an angry voicemail from Tyler. I set the phone face down on the table. Not now. Maybe not ever. I moved to my laptop, the same one that held the folder they never knew existed. Family ledger. I opened it, scanning the meticulously organized evidence, the screenshots, statements, forged signatures, the clip notes from Grandma Helen's box. One file sat unopened. An image Jordan had helped me extract from the old documents tucked beneath Helen's handwritten letters. A scanned page from years ago 2000, and three bearing my father's name. A loan, a default, and a note scribbled in Helen's handwriting. He did it once. He will do it again. Protect yourself. I leaned back slowly, breath catching. They thought tonight was the worst of it. They thought the investigation was the end. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because there were more documents in that box, ones I hadn't handed over. Ones I wasn't sure I would ever need. Unless they tried to rewrite the story. Unless they tried to make me the villain. I closed the laptop gently, the click echoing in the quiet room. They believed they lost control of me tonight. But what they didn't know, what they had never even considered, was that I was finally learning how to control the truth. And truth, once woken, doesn't go back to sleep. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, know this: you're not alone. What happened to me didn't happen overnight, and choosing myself wasn't betrayal. It was survival. If any part of my story hit something inside you, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, stories about finding your voice after years of being silent, stick around, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and remember, you deserve a life that isn't built on guilt or fear. This story isn't over.